Some coffees get talked about all the time. The fancy bags, the specialty roasts, the brands with complicated tasting notes. But if you actually walk through a normal grocery store, you'll notice something interesting. A lot of the coffees people quietly buy every week are not the ones getting all the attention. And a few of them are much better than people expect. The first one is Lavazza Qualita Rossa. You've probably seen this red bag many times. In Europe, it's everywhere. In parts of South America, it's common. In the United States, you'll find it in international aisles, Italian markets, and sometimes in regular grocery stores. And yet a lot of people overlook it because it doesn't try to look modern or premium. Lavazza has been roasting coffee in Italy since the late 1800s, and Qualita Rossa became one of their most recognizable everyday blends. The idea behind it was simple. Make a coffee that works for daily drinking. Nothing extreme, nothing complicated. What surprises people is how balanced it actually is. When you brew it in a normal drip machine, the flavor sits right in the middle. Not too bitter, not too light. It has a slightly nutty tone with a hint of chocolate in the background. It's not trying to be a specialty coffee experience. It's just dependable. And that's exactly why many households keep buying it for years. Another reason people underestimate this coffee is the packaging. The red bag doesn't scream luxury. It doesn't promise rare beans from some hidden mountain farm. But once you actually brew it, you realize it's simply a solid, everyday coffee. It also works with different brewing styles. Drip machines, mocha pots, and even simple pour-over setups handle it well. That flexibility matters because most people don't want coffee to feel like a science. Experiment every morning. They just want something that works. Lavazza Qualita Rossa is one of those coffees that quietly fits into a routine without asking for attention. And sometimes those are the ones people appreciate the most. The next one is Illy Classico. This coffee sits in a slightly different category, but it's still surprisingly underestimated considering how widely available it is. Illy is an Italian company known for consistencies. Buy a can of Illy in Rome, New York, Tokyo, or São Paulo, and the flavor is meant to be almost identical. That kind of control is rare in the coffee world. Illy focuses entirely on Arabica beans, and the Classico roast is designed to stay balanced. It's a medium roast that avoids the extremes that often make coffee harsh. When you brew it, the flavor tends to feel smooth, with light caramel notes and a clean finish. One reason this coffee is underestimated is price perception. Some people assume that if a coffee is widely available, it must be average. But Illy built its reputation on consistency. Instead of chasing trends, the company focused on making the same blend taste the same year after year. For someone drinking coffee every morning, that kind of stability matters more than complexity. Another thing that makes Illy stand out is the packaging. The pressurized metal cans are designed to protect the coffee from air, which helps maintain freshness longer than most traditional bags. It's a small detail, but it affects how the coffee tastes when you finally open it. In everyday use, Illy Classico tends to be very forgiving. You don't need expensive equipment. Even a basic drip machine produces a smooth cup. The flavor stays mild enough that most people can drink it black without feeling overwhelmed. And for people trying to simplify their coffee routine, that's a big advantage. The next coffee on this list surprises people for a different reason. Tim Hortons Original Blend. For Canadians, this coffee is practically part of everyday culture. But outside Canada, most people see the brand mainly as a fast food chain and assume the coffee must be average. The truth is a bit more interesting. Tim Hortons built its coffee reputation on making something extremely drinkable. The roast isn't aggressive. It leans slightly medium, with low bitterness and a smooth body. The goal was never to create a dramatic flavor profile. The goal was to make a coffee people could drink every day without getting tired of it, and that approach worked. Over time, the brand expanded into packaged coffee, sold in grocery stores across North America and other markets. When brewed at home, the original blend stays very approachable, not heavy, doesn't overwhelm the palate, just sits comfortably in that middle ground. For a lot of people, that's exactly what they want in a morning cup. Another reason this coffee gets underestimated is expectation. People often assume anything connected to a large chain must be mediocre, but the blend was designed to work with the simple brewing methods used in millions of kitchens. That means it tends to behave well in a normal drip machine. The flavor profile stays gentle and slightly nutty, with a mild roast character that doesn't dominate the cup. Some coffees taste impressive for 2 sips and then become exhausting to drink. Tim Hortons was designed to avoid that problem. It's built for routine, and when coffee fits naturally into a routine, people tend to keep buying it for years without thinking too much about it. The next coffee takes us back to Italy, but with a slightly stronger personality. Segafredo Intermezzo. Segafredo is another historic Italian coffee company, and Intermezzo became one of its most recognizable blends worldwide. In many European supermarkets, you'll find it sitting quietly among dozens of other brands, but people who brew it regularly know it has a lot more character than the packaging suggests. Int is known for being a bit bolder than the coffees we've talked about so far. The blend combines Arabica and Robusta beans, which gives it a deeper body and a stronger aroma. Some people see Robusta on the label and immediately assume the coffee must be lower quality, but when used well, Robusta adds crema, strength, and structure. That's exactly what Intermezzo delivers. When brewed in a mocha pot or espresso machine, the flavor becomes richer and slightly darker, with cocoa and toasted notes. In a drip machine, it still holds enough body to avoid tasting thin. That's why a lot of people reach for it when they want something stronger without going all the way into an extremely dark roast. Another advantage is availability. Segafredo distributes coffee in dozens of countries. European supermarkets, Asian markets, and sometimes even North American specialty shops. Despite that global presence, it rarely gets the same attention as trendier brands, which makes it easy to underestimate. But when you brew it properly, Intermezzo shows exactly why traditional Italian blends have lasted so long. They're designed to deliver a dependable cup every day. And sometimes, reliability matters. Moretan hype. The next coffee has a very different origin, and it surprises people for an entirely different reason. Dallmayr Prodomo outside Europe. Most people have never heard of it, but in Germany and several parts of Europe, this coffee has been a quiet staple for decades. Walk into a supermarket in Munich, Vienna, or Prague, and you'll probably see the familiar gold and blue packaging on the shelf, and the reason it's lasted that long is simply it works. Dallmayr designed Prodomo to be a balanced everyday coffee, enough character to feel interesting, but not so much intensity that it becomes hard to drink. The beans are mostly Arabica, and the roast sits comfortably in the medium range. When brewed in a normal drip machine, the flavor comes across clean and smooth. There's a mild chocolate tone and a gentle bitterness that fades quickly instead of lingering on your tongue. It doesn't feel heavy, and it doesn't demand much attention. That's exactly why so many households keep buying it. One reason people underestimate Dallmayr Prodomo is that the brand doesn't push hard outside Europe. No chasing social media trends or flashy packaging, but inside Germany, it's one of those coffees that quietly built trust over generations. Another thing worth mentioning is how forgiving this blend is. Even if the grind or coffee-to-water ratio isn't perfect, the cup still turns out pleasant. For people making coffee early in the morning before work, that kind of reliability is valuable. Coffee shouldn't feel like a complicated project, it should feel like part of the routine. Prodomo fits that role surprisingly well. The next coffee is another European brand that many people outside the region underestimate. Tchibo Fine Milde. Tchibo is a German company that got its start in the coffee business decades ago and eventually became one of the largest coffee retailers in Europe. In some countries, they even operate entire chains of coffee-focused stores. Fine Milde, which translates roughly to fine mild, is exactly what the name suggests. This coffee leans toward a lighter, Gentler flavor profile. The roast is designed to cut down on harsh bitterness and keep the cup easy to drink, especially for people who prefer something smooth over something intense. When brewed in a drip machine, the result is a soft, mellow cup with a light body and subtle sweetness. It doesn't overwhelm the palate, and that's intentional. Some coffees try to impress you right away. Fine Milde is designed to disappear into the background of your morning routine. For a lot of people, that's exactly the point. Another reason this coffee gets underestimated is that mild blends often get labeled as weak, but mild doesn't mean flavorless. In this case, it means balanced, low acidity, controlled bitterness, and an overall cup that stays very approachable. That's why many people who drink multiple cups a day prefer coffees like this. It's easier on the palate and easier on the stomach. And once a coffee becomes part of your daily rhythm, those small things start to matter more than you'd expect. Now the next coffee is much more familiar to people in North America. Peet's Major Dickason's blend. Peet's coffee helped shape the modern specialty coffee movement in the United States long before large chains started popular espresso drinks everywhere. Major Dickason's blend became one of their most famous creations, and for good reason. It's bold, but controlled. This is a darker roast compared to most of the coffees we've talked about so far. But unlike a lot of dark roasts that end up tasting burnt, Major Dickason's blend focuses on depth instead of harshness. When brewed properly, the flavor is rich and full-bodied, with deep cocoa tones and a slightly smoky finish. It's the kind of coffee people reach for when they want something that feels substantial in the cup. Despite that reputation, it's surprisingly versatile. It works well in drip machines, French press setups, and even espresso-style brewing. And because Peet's keeps tight control over roasting and sourcing, the flavor tends to stay consistent from batch to batch. That consistency is one reason the blend has stayed popular for decades. Another reason people underestimate this coffee is expectation. When a brand becomes widely available in grocery stores, some people assume the quality must have dropped. But with Major Dickason's blend, the formula stayed remarkably stable. It's still the same deep, comforting coffee people discovered years ago. And for drinkers who enjoy a darker profile without extreme bitterness, it continues to be a solid, dependable option. The final coffee on this list might be the most globally recognizable of all, and also one of the most frequently underestimated, Nescafe Gold. Instant coffee gets dismissed right away by serious coffee drinkers, and in some cases, that criticism is fair. But Nescafe Gold sits in a slightly different category than the instant coffees most people remember from years ago. It's designed to be a higher-end instant option. The coffee granules are made using a freeze-drying process that preserves more aroma than older spray-dried instant coffees. The result is a cup that feels smoother and less harsh than what most people expect from instant. Is it the same as freshly brewed coffee? Of course not. But the convenience factor changes the equation. With Nescafe Gold, you can make a cup almost anywhere. All you need is hot water. For people traveling, working long hours, or just wanting something quick in the morning, that simplicity matters. The flavor profile stays mild, with gentle roasted notes and a clean finish. It's not trying to compete with espresso or specialty beans. It focuses on reliability and ease. And that's why millions of people keep buying it all over the world. What all 8 coffees on this list have in common is something surprisingly simple. None of them rely on hype. None of them promise dramatic flavor experiences or rare beans from obscure farms. Instead, they focus on something far more practical: consistency. When coffee becomes part of a daily routine, the most important qualities aren't always complexity or intensity. More often, it's balance, reliability, and availability. A coffee you can find, easily brew quickly, and drink comfortably every morning. That's exactly why these brands keep surviving in supermarkets around the world. They may not get the most attention, but they quietly do their job. And sometimes the coffees people overlook turn out to be the ones that fit real life. best, most people assume the coffees getting the most attention are automatically the best ones, the bags with the most detailed descriptions, the labels talking about altitude, microlots, tasting notes, and roasting philosophy. But everyday coffee rarely works that way. Most people aren't building a coffee tasting ritual every morning. They're making a cup before work, before getting in the car, or before starting the day at home. In those moments, what actually matters is pretty simple. Can you find the coffee? Is the price reasonable? Does it taste good enough to drink every day? Those three questions quietly decide what people keep buying. And that's why so many of the coffees on this list have been around for decades. They've passed the most important test of all: routine. Take Lavazza Qualita Rossa as an example. It's not designed to be the most exciting coffee on the market, but millions of people know exactly what they're getting when they open that red bag. The flavor is familiar, the roast is stable, and the cup behaves predictably across different brewing methods. That predictability is valuable. The same goes for Illy Classico. The company puts serious effort into making sure the blend tastes the same across different countries. That level of control means someone can buy a can of Illy in one city and find the same flavor months later somewhere else entirely. For people who drink coffee every morning, that consistency removes friction. You don't have to rethink your choice every week. Then there are brands like Hortons and Segafredo that built their reputation on approachability coffees, designed to be comfortable rather than impressive, smooth rather than extreme. Those kinds of blends tend to stick around because they fit naturally into everyday life. The same pattern shows up with Dallmayr Prodomo and Tchibo Fine Milde, both brands focused on balance. Not too strong, not too light, not too bitter. The goal wasn't to dominate the cup. The goal was to make something people could drink regularly without getting tired of it. And that's often the secret behind long-lasting coffee brands. They avoid extremes. Even Peet's major Dickason's blend, which is much darker than most coffees on this list, follows the same idea. Bold, but controlled. Deep, without crossing into burnt. That careful balance is why so many people keep coming back to it. And then there's Nescafe Gold, which reminds us that convenience also plays a real role in how people choose coffee. Sometimes, the best coffee for a situation is simply the one that's easiest to make. If you're traveling, working long hours, or staying somewhere without a proper coffee setup, instant coffee solves the problem fast, and when the flavor is decent enough, most people are perfectly satisfied. So when you step back and look at all 8 coffees together, a pattern starts to appear. They aren't the coffees generating the most excitement online. They aren't dominating social media or specialty coffee forums, but they're widely available. They're reliable, and they quietly work in the background of everyday life. That's why people underestimate them. The coffee world tends to focus on extremes. The rarest beans, the most complex roasting techniques, the newest trends, but most people simply want something that tastes good and fits their routine. When a coffee manages to do that consistently, it becomes something people trust. And once trust enters the equation, the coffee doesn't need to fight for attention anymore. It just stays on the shelf, waiting for the next person who wants a dependable cup. That's the quiet advantage of underestimated coffees. They don't need hype to survive. They just need to keep doing their job well enough that people come back for another bag next week. And for millions of coffee drinkers around the world, that's exactly what these 8 coffees keep doing.